Maya just wanted to deposit her money, but the bank treated her like a criminal. A simple transaction, a 13-year-old girl, and a system that judged her skin color more than her honesty. "This money can't be yours," the teller sneered. One sentence, and everything changed. What they didn't know was that the girl they just humiliated was the daughter of the bank's chairman, and in just a few minutes, the entire system was about to collapse. Maya Freeman pushed open the heavy glass doors of Meridian Financial Bank, her heart fluttering with excitement. Today was a big day, her first real step toward financial independence. Clutching a thick envelope of $5,000 in her hands, she took a deep breath, letting the cool air of the bank's grand lobby wash over her. The sight before her was mesmerizing. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above polished marble floors, reflecting the wealth and power that surrounded her. Employees in neatly pressed suits moved efficiently, their voices a low hum as they assisted clients. The air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paper, an atmosphere of professionalism and prestige. Maya felt a rush of pride. She had earned this money from prestigious math scholarships, birthday gifts, and years of saving. This was the first deposit into her own savings account. Her father, Frederick Freeman, the chairman of the bank, had always told her the value of financial independence. But Maya didn't want to rely on his name. She wanted to experience banking just like any other customer. As she stepped into the line, her excitement dimmed. Something felt off. A middle-aged white man in an expensive suit walked in and barely had to take 2 steps before an employee rushed over with a wide smile. "Good afternoon, sir. Right this way to the VIP lounge." The man didn't even glance at the long line of waiting customers as he was escorted past them. Maya's gaze shifted to an elderly Asian couple. They received no warm welcome, just a cold, dismissive wave toward the waiting area. A Spanish man in work clothes stepped up to the counter, only to be bombarded with questions. "Do you have ID? Social security card? Proof of employment?" Meanwhile, a white woman before him had cashed her check with no hassle at all. Maya's fingers tightened around her envelope. The contrast was undeniable. People weren't being treated the same. Still, she remained patient, inching forward as the line moved. She was just a customer, just here to deposit her money. She had no idea that, within minutes, this visit would turn into a battle for justice that would shake the entire bank to its core. Maya stepped forward to the counter, carefully placing the thick envelope filled with cash onto the smooth surface. Her heart pounded with anticipation. This was a moment of pride, a milestone in her journey toward financial independence. Beth, the teller, barely glanced at Maya before her eyes locked onto the envelope. Instead of the professional smile she had given previous customers, her face tightened into a suspicious frown. She lifted the envelope slightly, weighing it in her hands, then looked up at Maya with thinly veiled skepticism. Where did this money come from? Beth's tone was flat, devoid of the warmth she had offered to others. Maya blinked. The question was unexpected, almost absurd. She had watched others deposit money without being interrogated. Swallowing the first wave of frustration, she answered calmly, "It's from a math scholarship and birthday gifts." Beth's expression remained cold. Without another word, she turned to Mark, the senior teller at the next counter. "Mark, can you take a look at this?" Mark, a man in his early 30s with a polished watch that gleamed under the fluorescent lights, swiveled his chair toward them. His sharp blue eyes studied Maya, scanning her from head to toe. Her simple hoodie, her jeans, her sneakers. His lips curled slightly, forming a smirk that sent a chill through her. "This amount seems excessive," he remarked, tilting his head, "especially for someone like you." Maya's fingers curled into a fist at her side, but she kept her voice steady. "I told you. It's my money. I have an account here." Mark exchanged a glance with Beth, and something unspoken passed between them. Then, lowering his voice but making sure Maya could still hear, he muttered, "Could be dirty money. Someone might have asked her to deposit it for them." The words stung. Maya inhaled sharply, willing herself not to react, not to let them see how much their doubt burned her. "I've already explained," she said, her voice unwavering. "Now, are you going to process my deposit or not?" Beth hesitated, then deliberately turned her screen away from Maya as she tapped at her keyboard. "Do you have any documentation to prove it?" Maya stiffened. Documentation? Why? No one else was asked for that. Beth shrugged. "It's standard procedure." It wasn't. They were stalling. They didn't want to serve her. "Maybe we have a money laundering case here," Mark added with a mocking sneer. Heads turned. Nearby customers began to whisper. Some averted their gazes, not wanting to get involved. Others watched with curiosity or disapproval. Maya's breath came faster, but she refused to let her anger show. She wasn't going to give them an excuse to throw her out. Then, the sound of clicking heels cut through the air. A woman in a sleek navy blue suit approached, exuding authority with every step. The crowd instinctively parted to make way. Jessica Keller, the branch manager. She arrived at the counter and gave Maya a slow, scrutinizing look, as if assessing whether she was worth her time. "What seems to be the problem here?" Jessica asked, her voice smooth but laced with condescension. "She wants to deposit this amount," Beth explained, pushing the envelope slightly toward Jessica. "But something about it seems off." Jessica arched a well-manicured eyebrow before turning her attention fully to Maya. "Sweetheart," she began, her tone patronizing, "this money isn't for you." Maya's body went rigid. "Excuse me?" she said, voice clipped. Jessica sighed dramatically, leaning slightly closer as if speaking to a child. "Maybe you should go to one of those places that specialize in cash deposits," she said, her voice quieter, but still loud enough for those nearby to hear. And then, the words that sealed the moment. "People like you should go elsewhere." A thick silence fell over the bank. A few customers gasped. A middle-aged man in a suit shifted uncomfortably. An elderly woman clutched her handbag a little tighter. Maya felt heat rise in her chest. Her nails dug into her palm. She had heard those words before, not always spoken outright, but in looks, in actions, in dismissals. Not today. Her voice came out like steel. "I want to speak to your superior." Jessica let out a sharp, amused laugh. "I am the superior." Maya didn't blink. She reached into her hoodie pocket, pulled out her phone, and dialed. A moment later, a deep, commanding voice answered. "Maya, what's wrong?" She took a steady breath, then spoke loud enough for the entire bank to hear. "I'm at the main branch of your bank, Dad, and they won't let me deposit my money." Maya stood firm, her phone pressed to her ear, as the low, authoritative voice of her father came through the line. "Maya, what's wrong?" Her eyes didn't waver as she spoke, making sure every single person in the bank heard her. "I'm at the main branch of your bank, Dad, and they won't let me deposit my money." A ripple of silence spread through the bank. The customers who had been whispering now fell completely still. The employees at their desks froze, their hands suspended over keyboards. Even the security guard near the entrance shifted uneasily. But no one was more shaken than Jessica Keller. Her confident smirk faltered as her eyes widened slightly. "What did you just say?" she asked, though her voice was not nearly as steady as before. Maya lowered the phone slightly, just enough to look Jessica straight in the eye. "I said I'm calling my father, Frederick Freeman, the chairman of Meridian Financial Bank." Jessica's face lost all color. Mark, who had been standing with his arms crossed, suddenly looked as if someone had yanked the ground from under him. Beth's mouth fell open, but no words came out. A few gasps echoed in the bank. One man, who had been standing in line behind Maya, glanced at Jessica with barely concealed disgust. Another customer, an older woman, shook her head slightly as if realizing just how deep this mistake had become. Maya kept the phone to her ear, her heartbeat steady, as she listened to her father's measured breathing. "Put whoever is in charge on the phone. Now." Maya extended the phone toward Jessica. Jessica hesitated. 1,000 thoughts must have raced through her mind. How to salvage this, how to deny it, how to pretend it was all a misunderstanding. But there was no escape. The entire bank was watching. Slowly, stiffly, she reached for the phone. When she brought it to her ear, her voice had none of its earlier arrogance. "Mr. Freeman, I want an explanation in 3 minutes." His voice cut through, sharp and controlled. "Before I arrive." Jessica inhaled sharply, her fingers tightening around the phone. Maya stepped back, watching her with unblinking eyes. The bank lobby, once filled with casual conversations and financial transactions, now felt like a courtroom where the guilty had just been sentenced. At Meridian Financial's headquarters, the atmosphere was nothing short of electric. Inside the high-tech Security Operations Center, a team of analysts had been monitoring transactions across all branches. A junior technician, scrolling through flagged interactions, had initially been drawn to an unusual alert, a high-value transaction being questioned at the main branch. But what made him pause wasn't the transaction itself. It was the account holder's name, Maya Freeman. His stomach dropped. He immediately tapped into the bank's surveillance system, pulling up the footage from the main branch. Within moments, The entire security team was watching a live feed of Maya standing at the counter, being humiliated in front of an entire room of customers. A heavy silence fell over the room as they listened to Jessica's words. "People like you should go elsewhere." The technician swallowed hard. "Sir," he called out to the head of security, "we have a major issue." Within minutes, the footage was sent directly to the executive team. Frederick Freeman had just ended his call with Maya when his personal assistant rushed into his office. "Sir, you need to see this." Frederick turned to the large screen on his office wall, where the video of his daughter's interaction at the bank played out. His face remained unreadable as he watched Maya try to reason with the employees, as Mark sneered, as Jessica dismissed her. When the clip ended, a suffocating silence filled the boardroom. Diane Porter, the bank's chief operating officer, set her tablet down, her expression unreadable, but her grip tight. She didn't need to ask what they were about to do. Frederick took a deep breath. His voice, though calm, carried a dangerous edge. "We're going there. Now." Within minutes, the executive team, composed of the most powerful figures in Meridian Financial, descended from the top floor, heading straight for the fleet of black cars waiting in the private parking garage. Never in the history of the bank had such a high-level group mobilized so quickly. But this wasn't just about Maya anymore. As the security team continued reviewing the footage, a horrifying pattern emerged. Maya wasn't the only victim. The system had been flawed for a long time. One after another, clips surfaced, of white businessmen being greeted warmly and led to private rooms, while minority customers were ignored or interrogated. An elderly Asian couple being brushed aside, a Latino worker being asked for extra identification, while a white customer before him had been allowed to cash a check without any issue. It was systemic. Diane Porter clenched her jaw. "This isn't an isolated incident." Frederick didn't respond immediately. He stared at the screen, his face impassive, but his hands clenched into tight fists. Finally, he turned to his team. His voice was quiet, but filled with steel. "They think they can run my bank like this?" No one answered. No one dared to. Moments later, the convoy of executive vehicles roared out of the garage, heading straight for the main branch. And at the bank, as Jessica Keller desperately tried to compose herself, she had no idea that her worst nightmare was already on its way. Frederick Freeman stepped into the bank, and the entire room fell silent. His presence alone was enough to send a wave of unease through the employees. Jessica Keller, Mark, and Richard, who had so confidently dismissed and humiliated Maya just moments ago, suddenly stiffened. Their faces drained of color as realization struck. This wasn't just another customer complaint. They had mistreated the daughter of the most powerful man in the bank. And now, they were about to face the consequences. Maya stood beside her father, her expression calm but firm. She had already said everything she needed to. The proof of their actions was in the way they had treated her, the way they had judged her. And now, it was about to be exposed for all to see. Frederick's sharp eyes locked onto Jessica first. His voice was cold, controlled, but filled with an unmistakable rage. "Jessica Keller," he said, "I want you to repeat, in front of everyone, what exactly you said to my daughter." Jessica opened her mouth, but no words came out. The same woman who had confidently dismissed Maya now trembled under the weight of her own actions. Frederick didn't wait for an answer. He turned to Diane Porter, the bank's chief operating officer, who stood beside him with a tablet in her hands. "Play the footage," he instructed. The large customer display screen flickered to life, and the entire bank watched as security footage from earlier played out. Gasps filled the room as they saw the humiliating interrogation Maya had endured. The cold glances, the whispers, the disbelief that a young black girl could legally have that much money. And finally, Jessica's own words echoed through the speakers. "People like you should go elsewhere." A heavy silence settled over the bank. Some customers exchanged outraged glances. Others looked away, ashamed that they had stood by and watched. Jessica, Mark, and Richard stood frozen, their disgrace now public, undeniable. Jessica tried to stammer out an excuse. "Mr. Freeman, You're fired." The words cut through the air like a blade. Jessica stumbled back, her hands trembling. "Please, Frederick's expression didn't change. "You humiliated my daughter. You judged a customer based on nothing but prejudice, and you did it in my bank." His voice remained steady, but the anger in his eyes was undeniable. "Get out." Jessica's lips quivered. She looked around desperately, but there was no one left to defend her. No one spoke up. She had built her career on control, on making the rules, but today she had no power left. With no choice, she turned and walked toward the exit, her steps heavy with humiliation. Frederick's attention shifted to Mark and Richard. "You two." He pointed at them, his voice sharper than ever. "You're both fired as well." Mark's usual smugness disappeared. "Sir, please, get out." Richard swallowed hard, his face pale. Unlike Jessica, he didn't even try to argue. Both men turned and followed Jessica, their careers shattered in a matter of minutes. The entire bank was still in stunned silence when Frederick turned his attention to Beth, the young teller who had stood by and let everything happen. "Beth." She flinched, her breath caught in her throat. "You had a choice," Frederick said, his tone softer but firm. "You could have spoken up. You could have stopped this. But you stayed silent." Tears welled up in her eyes. I was scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Frederick studied her for a moment. Then finally he said, "You will not be fired today, but you are on probation. 3 months to prove that you understand what went wrong here, and that you will never let it happen again." Beth nodded quickly, barely able to breathe. "I won't let you down." With the guilty employees gone, Frederick turned to the remaining staff, his voice carrying through the entire bank. "This will never happen again." Diane stepped forward, holding up the tablet once more. "From this moment, Meridian Financial is implementing immediate reforms to ensure this kind of discrimination never happens again." Everyone listened as she outlined the new policies. Every transaction would be monitored for fairness. Customers would have direct access to a complaint hotline. Mandatory anti-discrimination training would be required for all employees, with immediate consequences for violations. A shift was happening. Employees glanced at one another, some nervous, some hopeful. Customers, many of whom had silently endured discrimination in the past, watched in quiet awe. Frederick took a deep breath and looked at Maya, his daughter, the girl who had stood her ground and forced an entire system to change. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did well, Maya." She smiled, not in victory, but in relief. This wasn't about winning. This was about making sure no one else had to go through what she had. And as Jessica, Mark, and Richard walked out of the bank for the last time, it was clear. Discrimination would no longer be tolerated here. And with these new reforms, the entire banking system was about to change forever. The impact of Maya's story was immediate and far-reaching. Within hours, social media exploded with outrage and support. Videos of the incident at Meridian Financial Bank spread across platforms like wildfire. Clips showed Maya standing at the counter, facing blatant discrimination, and the dramatic moment when she called her father, the bank's chairman. The public watched in disbelief as the bank employees, once so confident in their biases, crumbled in fear when Frederick Freeman arrived to expose them. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, every major media channel was covering it. The story resonated with millions. People from all walks of life, especially those who had faced similar discrimination, shared their own experiences. Customers who had been quietly mistreated for years finally had a voice. Hashtags like #Justice for Maya and #Banking Reform now trended worldwide. The pressure on Meridian Financial was immense. With the whole world watching, the bank had no choice but to take immediate action. Under Frederick Freeman's leadership, a new era of financial fairness began. Strict customer service monitoring was implemented with AI-assisted oversight to ensure fair treatment for all, regardless of appearance or background. Every transaction was tracked to detect potential bias. Anonymous complaint hotlines were introduced, allowing customers to report discrimination directly to upper management, bypassing biased employees. Every report was taken seriously. Employees at all levels had to undergo fairness training with strict evaluations. Those who failed were dismissed. An independent financial fairness council was formed, including community leaders, customers, and financial experts, responsible for monitoring and reporting unethical banking practices. The bank committed to regularly publishing data on service equity, ensuring accountability to the public. But the change didn't stop at Meridian Financial. Other banks, seeing the massive backlash and fearing similar exposure, were forced to reassess their own policies. Some scrambled to make quiet internal changes, while others publicly announced their own initiatives to prevent racial and financial discrimination. The industry was shifting, and it had all started because a 13-year-old girl refused to be silenced. Months after the scandal, Maya returned to the bank, not as a viral sensation, not as the chairman's daughter, but as an ordinary customer. She deliberately dressed the same way, jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers. just like that first visit. This time, there were no suspicious glances, no whispered judgments, no unnecessary questioning. Instead, as soon as she stepped inside, a teller looked up and greeted her with a warm smile. "Good afternoon. How can I assist you today?" There was no hesitation, no doubt, just professional, fair service. Maya walked to the counter and handed over a check for $10,000, a test to see if things had truly changed. Beth, the same teller who had once hesitated, now processed the deposit quickly and efficiently. No questions, no scrutiny. As Maya waited for her receipt, she glanced around the bank. She saw a Spanish man in work clothes being served without hassle, an elderly black woman being treated with dignity, and an Asian couple greeted with the same respect as wealthy clients. The toxic system had been dismantled. For the first time, Maya felt that real change had taken place, not just in policies, not just in media statements, but in the everyday actions of people. She took her receipt, smiled, and walked out of the bank. This time, she didn't leave with anger, frustration, or humiliation. This time, she left knowing she had changed an entire system. Because that day, Maya didn't just deposit money. She deposited change.